Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1:30. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for July 5th, 2022. Just as a note, yesterday, apart from Independence Day for our southern neighbor, July 4th marked the 50th anniversary of our sister city relationship with Laconia. So the oldest in the province and older, in fact, than the Alberta-Japan Twinned Municipalities Association. Unfortunately, we weren't able to celebrate that occasion in any meaningful way, but hopefully we'll find some opportunity in the coming months. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to the agenda? Hearing nothing, may I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda for today's meeting as presented? Councillor Keller-Haranthy, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. We have two sets of minutes for approval. Firstly, the minutes of the regular meeting of June 21st, 2022. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Seeing nothing, may I have a motion, please? Councillor Waxer, thank you. I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of June 21st, 2022 as presented. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. And we also have the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of June 28th, 2022. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Mr. Melnick, Councillor Melnick.
Thank you. While I wasn't in attendance, I did have the opportunity to review the YouTube, but also I did notice at the end of the minutes that the time that we adjourned, or that was adjourned, was probably off by 20 minutes. I think it should be 12:58, not 12:38.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. I'm not sure that I have an independent recollection of that.
Your Worship, I think Councillor Melnick's correct. The motion to revert to open meeting was at 12:57, and so
correct.
the adjournment would follow that. Looks like just a simple typo, and thanks to Councillor Melnick and his level of detail for catching that.
Subject to that minor correction, then from 12:38 to 12:58, are there any other errors, omissions, or corrections to be made to the minutes of the June 28th Committee of the Whole meeting? If not, could I have a motion, please, then to approve those minutes as corrected? Councillor Wilson, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Is there any business arising from those minutes, either set or other minutes? If not, we will move to presentations. I believe that we do have a presentation scheduled from Trans Mountain. I'm not entirely clear on who the presenter is, but somebody online, but Mr. Gibbon. Go ahead, you can make an introduction.
Yes, Your Worship. We're joined this afternoon by Mr. Kent Taylor with Trans Mountain. He's here to provide council with a brief update on the status of the project. Kent, we'll turn it over to you, and assuming that you can hear us well, and I think you're in charge of your presentation over there, and so we'll send it to you.
Thanks very much. Again, my name is Kent Taylor. I'm the community liaison for Trans Mountain. I cover the Edmonton, or the Alberta area rather, and I have Kate Stebbings with me. Kate, are you able to communicate. I'm not sure if you're able to have access to it.
Yes, thanks, Kent. I was given access just now. So.
All right, perfect.
Go ahead.
I'll share my screen. Attempt to here. Let's see if technology works in our favor.
It looks like we can see that here, Ken.
Okay, perfect. All right, my screen is just 1 second. Ah, here we go. Can you see it okay?
Oh, good.
Okay, I can't see you right now, but I'll go through the slides. Well, Kate, I'll let you introduce yourself and your role with Trans Mountain.
Sure. Thanks, Kent. And thanks to Mayor and Council for allowing us to provide this update on the Trans Mountain expansion project today. My name is Kate Stebbings, and I'm the manager of engagement for the expansion project. Kent's the person on the ground and has most familiarity with construction activities in the region, and I support Kent in his role. Thanks, Kent. Back to you.
Okay, so well, Kate, I'll actually toss it back to you again. We'll start with the construction overview of the overarching project.
You can move to the next slide, please, Kent.
Okay. Oh, I must be a slide behind. Do you have slide 2, Kate?
You have the deck, and it will show on the title slide. Sorry, folks, we're obviously not in the same location, so we're coordinating multiple technologies at one time. We're great at pipelines, but technologies seem to be a challenge. Can you advance your decks, Kent?
Yeah, I am, but it isn't it's not moving on your end, I think.
While Kent is working on that, I'll just provide a bit of a verbal update, and then we can look at the slide once we move it along. So just to ensure sort of a common familiarity with what we're talking about today, the Trans Mountain pipeline system was built in 1953, and it's almost 1,200 kilometers long. Pipeline runs between Sherwood Park, just east of Edmonton, all the way through to Burnaby Terminal in British Columbia. Our expansion project, really in its simplest form, involves a twinning of the existing line. And so when the first pipeline was put in the ground, it was put in an 18-meter wide right-of-way and was offset to one side. And so what the expansion project involves is putting a second pipeline beside the first within that same right-of-way. And we can do this about 73% of the way. And then the rest of the route, we need to deviate from that pipeline corridor to accommodate urban growth and other environmental considerations. So the project includes almost 1,000 kilometers of new pipeline. There we are, Kent, we're up and running.
Okay.
And almost 1,000 kilometers of new pipeline, as well as 2 areas of reactivation. And these 2 reactivation segments are in locations where we already have 2 pipelines in the ground within that corridor. And many of you may remember the work that was done during Anchor Loop through the Jasper region, where we did install that second line. The pipeline construction has been divided up into a number of different sections and assigned to different contractors with expertise in those particular areas. So for example, our contractors who are working in Alberta are great at the flat agricultural areas, have very different skill sets than the ones that we're using in some of the more complicated rocky terrain in the Coquihalla and in the more mountainous areas of British Columbia. So today we're going to be focusing in on the reactivation segment, which passes through Jasper as well as Mount Robson areas, and we'll be providing a little bit more detail about what's the work that's underway there, as well as what is anticipated in the coming months. We are building a number of new pump stations and also to support the new pipeline. Although there are a number of those within Alberta, none of them are within the reactivation segment. So our pipeline activities are really focusing on reactivating the pipe that has been maintained in its existing condition through that area. Let's try for the next slide, Kent. Hey, we're working now. So as of mid-June, the pipeline expansion project is more than 58% complete. And that includes not only the pipeline corridor itself, as well as our facilities, including pump stations and tanks, which are located at either end of the pipeline. So as of mid-June, we have cleared the right-of-way. 667 kilometers were cleared, so that means getting it ready for construction. 575 kilometers are welded together, and almost 530 kilometers of pipeline is already in the ground. So that's tucked away in the ground, ready to run with backfill on top of it. We've completed 32 major trenchless crossings. So these are places where we use big pieces of equipment to drill under waterways or roadways so that we don't disturb the surface. We drill a tunnel underneath and insert the pipe through the tunnel. And there are a number of different methods that we use to do that. And then at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Kent to focus in on our construction in Alberta itself.
Thanks, Kate. So in Alberta, spread 1, which runs from basically through the east side of Edmonton around to Atchison, it's 100% mechanically complete. There's some veg management and monitoring going on as we speak. And then we move out west, spread 2 covers from Atchison to our Hinton pump station, which if you commute east, you probably will see it on the north side of the highway there. Spread 2 is about 78% complete. We are construction's underway. Obviously, right now with all the rain, it is a little bit slow moving right now, but we'll continue as weather permits. Moving into the facility end of things, 82% of our facilities are complete. They're mostly the mechanical part of it's complete. It's a little bit of civil work, some seeding, some touch-ups, just going through the checklist of outstanding action items at each facility. And then what's relevant to this group is the reactivation segment, and we're at 79% complete. So then you can see by the map, this is the reactivation segment in more detail, going from our Hinton pump station to Mount Robson. Sorry, you can see my slide deck. It's just the only way I could get the presentation to work correctly here. So we're, as Kate mentioned, the anchor loop was completed and there was twinning in 2008. We're currently working on reactivating the inactive segment of the pipeline from Hinton to Hargraves. What that entails is technical digs and then natural hazard remediation program, and it's nearing completion. We're planning to start what's called a hydro test, and basically what that is a pressurizing of the pipe with water and air, and it's a regulatory requirement to activate the pipeline. And so it's scheduled for later in the summer. You may see some temporary trails closed, dog park closure, and some no stopping signs up. There'll be some noise, but majority of the noise actually is going to be closer to the Hinton pump station, which is out of the park. That's where the release point will be. And then we're just moving into the project benefits. So the project itself the cost is $21.4 billion for construction. There is some increased tax revenue to local governments when in service, 46.7 billion combined government revenue for construction and the first 20 years of the expanded operations, 19.4 for Alberta. Employment and business opportunities for Indigenous, local, regional residents. There's just over 10,000 hires for Alberta to date. Workforce hosting, so there's accommodations and goods and services, as you're all aware. And then there's community investment opportunities that we've been supporting throughout the last several years. So then the Jasper workforce accommodations. So there's approximately 200 workers that are out supporting the reactivation program. Includes local workers, workers that are staying primarily in Hinton and Jasper. Majority of them are commuting from Hinton. They're using a combination of commercial, rental, and RV accommodations. Over the last few weeks or last month or so, a lot of them have moved to their RVs outside the national park. And a big reason is because they have a live allowance, and they are spending that locally, and over 14 million spent in the region. That's spread 2 plus reactivation. So then you can see here, there's a variety of community investment opportunities that we've participated in throughout 2021 and 2020. And then these are sponsorship or community investments along the path of our construction and our pipeline. So there's over 83,000 of local sponsorship and donations, employee donations, corporate donations, Trans Mountain corporate sponsorship. So Fort Edmonton, St. Anne, West Yellowhead, Strathcona County, Edson, Jasper, and Edson Food Bank, just to name a few. And then just to point out that we do have a mechanism in place to manage any issues or inquiries. So we have a dedicated team that'll take in any of the public inquiries. It'll be triaged for urgency, and all inquiries and responses are tracked. And then any directly affected landowner would have an assigned land agent. And then I guess my role to expand on that is I typically deal with any residents that are not directly affected by the pipeline construction. And now we're to the questions part. We'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Kent, and thank you, Kate, for that presentation. Questions from councillors? Councillor Wilson.
My question got answered almost immediately with the slide about local projects and initiatives that you've committed to in Jasper, and we really appreciate that. Thank you. My follow-up question, I guess, would be for any further opportunities or applications for I would say assistance, but donations or collaborative efforts to initiatives within our community. Would we be able to? Who would we speak to? Would that be the two of you? If, you know, I noticed that you did commit some monies towards our skate park that has yet to be built. But so for future communication, we'd be able to talk to you about any opportunities.
Yeah, so there's two things. Obviously, there's if you go on our website, there is a mechanism that you can go into and request support for any initiative. But also, I am part of the like I can be contacted and support any of those initiatives as well.
And then, and just to add to that, our corporate, we have contributions that are related to the expansion project construction. As we move into operations, the webpage that Ken was talking about, he can send you the link to make it easy. That's our ongoing corporate sponsorship process, and we have a team that manages our community investments through those submissions. The amounts tend to be modest, so with a limit of $5,000 in that program, but it is the ongoing process throughout the life of Trans Mountain that you would access in order to make a request.
Great. Well, I really appreciate your previous assistance, and thank you for that more of that information.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Are there other questions? Councillors, Councillor Melnick.
Thank Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Just a quick question as to the progress through Jasper. And I saw the percentages. What is the kind of forecasted completion date where the activities in Jasper National Park will be completed, other than probably soil and weed mitigation and ongoing tending to the pipeline right of way?
There's a couple factors. So the hydro test, which is scheduled for later in the summer, if we're anticipating a positive outcome of that, but if there is any action items that come from that, then our schedule will kind of be managed based on that. But what we're expecting, once the hydro test does get completed later in the summer, then some of our resources will decrease, and then it's exactly what you're mentioning. So then it will be more focused on cleanup and veg management after that, and then the maintenance of the pipeline.
Thank you for that. I know, having traveled to Kamloops over the last 3 months, there's a tremendous amount of activity that's going on, and there's a lot of focus on the rest of the pipeline. It's just interesting to see as it comes across the province and then into BC, the progress that continues to occur.
Yeah, it's a bit different activity for sure through the Jasper region. Yeah, it's a lot more robust when you get outside the park, as you've seen.
Thank you for that. Other questions, councillors? I will ask then on my own behalf to either or both of you. I had an opportunity May 25th to meet with Rafik from Trans Mountain, Rafik Eid, I think is his name, and also Ron Lampert, who is a councillor for the Sint First Nation, which is doing some contract work for Trans Mountain as it works through this project. And the discussion at that time was focused principally on the socioeconomic impacts of the workforce in Jasper in particular. And I appreciate that similar issues across the board for the length of the pipeline, but here particularly it was a housing issue, and I appreciate your indication that of a workforce of about 200, many have now gone to RVs for the summer. But do you have an indication of the number of your workforce residing in Jasper? And I ask that because we are experiencing a very tight housing market here. It's a perennial issue, and a lot of our local businesses are struggling to find room for their own employees. And so, similar to Councillor Melnick's question, I'm interested in sort of numbers now, but potential drawdown over the coming months as the work starts to wind up.
I don't have the exact numbers. I just, from checking in with the project team, we just know that the numbers have decreased over the summer just because people are trying to get into their RVs. And then obviously we're hoping to be completed the work before the weather changes, obviously. So, and we're just continuing to, I guess, monitor any, I just check in with the project team just to make sure that they are migrating to those RVs, and then that they're going to continue to stay in those types of accommodations. And I'll be honest, I haven't checked in with Rafik here for a little while to see if they're continuing to like the houses are to open up. So I'm not entirely sure what the numbers are though.
Yeah, and perhaps I can add a little more to that, Kent. Mayor, I think at peak over the winter, we were in approximately 50 different rental accommodations in the Jasper region. And as Kent points out, that use has significantly decreased. The workers are well motivated to get out of the higher price rental accommodation and get into their own RVs. They are working on an LOA compensation program for reactivation, and there has been significant movement out of the community. Again, we couldn't comment on numbers, but it's definitely the strong flow. And as we work through the reactivation, again, assuming that the testing confirms that the pipe is ready for use, those crews will be moving into British Columbia to support the reactivation of the other segment of the pipeline where we already have 2 lines in the ground there. So we would anticipate even a further decrease of that workforce into the early fall.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate all of that, and I really do extend my thanks and appreciation for your level of community involvement. A meeting such as this, or a presentation to council in a public venue, is really very much welcome. The earlier meeting that I had with Rafiq certainly was responsive to community concerns, and we really do appreciate that. And to make no mistake about it, there are many in town who also very much appreciate the economic activity that you've brought to them in particular. So I think you referenced a number of $14 million into local communities, and some of that obviously into Jasper, and there are people who have certainly benefited from that, and they send their appreciation. So thanks again for this presentation. I will look again to councillors for any other questions. And it appears not, so thank you very much for appearing and for the slide presentation that eventually worked perfectly.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks for your patience. I appreciate it. And thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
That takes us to agenda item 6, bylaws. There's a bylaw summary just for information, which takes us then to the business portion of the meeting. Agenda item 7, request for decision. And we can start with 7.1, Community Futures West Yellowhead. Mr. Gibbon.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. A very brief RFD attached for council's consideration. This item came up at last week's Committee of the Whole meeting on the 28th. The committee received a presentation and correspondence from Community Futures West Yellowhead requesting council support for a triage business retention and expansion project. Administration has identified, committee indicated that they wish to support the project, and administration has identified an appropriate funding source. It does have capacity. Administration also consulted with the relationship with external groups policy, F104, in accordance with that policy that was recently approved. This would end up on row D, if everybody remembers the colorful table that's there, meaning that this, because it is a one-time grant of over $2,000, it does require both formal council approval, which you could do here today, and the funding agreement, which administration would do subject to council giving approval. Administration has identified that an appropriate funding source could be from the council contributions to other groups line item in the operating budget. That item has just over $9,500, approximately $9,500 left in it. And so if council chose to fund the request from Community Futures for $8,720, it would leave that line item with $780 balance to be used for the balance of 2022. So, Your Worship, that brief report is there, along with the recommendation that's in alignment with the motion made at committee last week.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Wilson.
Just out of interest, what do we use on the other funds from the that funding?
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Wilson. The other was a relatively small amount. It was support for the actually Community Futures Lemonade Stand Day or Lemonade Day to support young entrepreneurs. So Jasper was the community sponsor for $500 for that category, which we did in 2021 as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Other questions? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just to reconfirm, in the review of the YouTube from last week with the discussions with Ms. Robbins and the fact that this will be a broad-based cross-section of our business community, including home-based businesses, I thought that was well presented, and I just wanted to add my support that there's an independent consultant doing this for the 5 different municipalities. I think will benefit from this greatly, and I'm looking forward to seeing what our businesses have to say regarding their current challenges coming out of the summer.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Mr. Given, but before I look for a motion, I have 2 questions. Firstly, as is shown in the RFD, there was at committee a recommendation both with respect to financial support and in-kind support, and I see that there is nothing in the motion before us about in-kind support, and is that in any way a necessary issue for administration? It would be an easy thing to add to the motion if it's seen as important.
No, Your Worship. It is, I think the description that we heard from Community Futures was essentially that they're looking for administrative contact. Both myself and Mr. Reed are ready to do that and able to do it. That doesn't sound like it's particularly onerous in terms of the policy that we have in terms of relationship with external groups. It is a one-off event or program. It can be done with admin approval to provide that kind of in-kind support or administrative support. And we would just make sure that we had a clear understanding of what Community Futures would need from us, which could be done by email, so we don't need formal council approval there.
Thank you for that. The second question is just the funding source, and I appreciate that it can come from an unallocated fund in council's budget. That would mean essentially that allocation is almost fully used. We're a little more than halfway through the year, but it would mean that we have nothing left for any other group that might come. So I'm just curious whether, I appreciate this is the source that administration identified, but is there any other source that is a potential source for funds so that we might hold in reserve some amount just in the possibility that another group comes forward before end of budget year looking for help?
Your Worship, there are not a wide variety. The other area that administration looked at was funding that had been dedicated to the Victim Services Organization. As council is aware, the organization has ceased to exist, and there's some movement in that area. Those funds have been returned to the municipality and so could be reallocated. They are still within the budget. There's approximately $12,000 there. So there is some additional flexibility in other places if another community group request came forward. Administration felt that the first area should be this one that was essentially without a dedicated and identified purpose. And then if there were additional sort of requests that came up through the course of the year, then we would bring forward a conversation to council about reallocation of the monies that were intended for victim services, or I should say returned from victim services.
Thank you for that. Any other questions for administration? If not, I would invite the councillor to make a motion. Councillor Waxer.
That council provides $8,720 to support the Community Futures West Yellowhead triage business retention and expansion program, and that the funding for the contribution be allocated from council's budget for contributions to other groups.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Waxer. Is there any debate? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 7.2. A request for support with respect to the Jasper Food Bank. Again, Mr. Given.
Yes, Your Worship. This item was covered last week, and the committee has recommended that council approve the request from the food bank. to pick up cardboard on site, and that council directed administration provide the service at no cost. I'll maybe just reference this again in the context of our relationship with external groups policy. The request is for non-financial support in the form of staff labor, but it is for an ongoing activity. And according to policy F104, the arrangement does require both council approval of the relationship and that the rules of each party be established in writing. So subject to council providing this formal approval today, administration would then work with the food bank to provide the goals and expectations in writing to the benefit of both the municipality and so next time we have to ask ourselves why we're providing a service, we have documentation, but also to the organization so that they can understand what the municipality will do for them. The rest of the items are there. Administration has identified that the request would entail approximately $1,700 a year in staff labor.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Any questions for administration with respect to this item? Councillor Reports.
Not actually a question, but I just wanted to indicate that I'm happy that we can do this, given that we heard last week that the food security needs in the community and in recognition of the volunteer base that's working very hard to ensure that those needs are met. So I'm very pleased that we can provide this small amount of support to them so that they can focus their efforts in other areas.
Thank you. Anything else? Again, Mr. Given, I'm sorry, Councillor Wilson.
No, go ahead.
I just have one inquiry again before there's a motion on the table. As I read the background material, the leaseholder is paying utility fees. And so I wonder whether it is accurate to say that the service, which I agree we ought to provide, but whether it's being provided at no cost rather than at no additional cost. Because it's different to say that somebody gets something for nothing than to say, well, you're already paying for that, yes, we should provide the service. And so with that nuance, I wonder whether it makes any difference when we look back and decide what we did and why we did it. Did we actually do it at no cost, or did we recognize that somebody is already paying the cost and we're not providing the service, so we should step up?
Your worship, I think it's the first, because other utility customers who pay recycling fee don't get the door-to-door pickup of their cardboard. So for example, you or I, any resident does pay a recycling fee with the expectation that we take our recyclables to a community depot and put them there. Really the nuance here is that we're doing something that the society could do, but given the stress that they're having around volunteers and some of the challenges, the municipality is offering the staff labor to do something. So they could and continue to be able to access the recycling infrastructure of the municipality that is essentially covered by, either by the leaseholders' payments or just generally that they're available in the community. What really is what the benefit the municipality is providing is that this labor no longer has to be done by volunteers. It's municipal staff doing the labor.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wilson, did you have a question?
No question, but I would be willing to make the motion that council approve the request from the Jasper Food Bank to pick up cardboard on site and direct administration to provide this service and cost.
Thank you for that motion. Is there any debate? Seeing nothing, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you. That takes us to agenda item 7.3, policy review priority list. Again, Mr. Given.
Thanks, Your Worship. Council's seen this a number of times. As you know, the renewed policy development and review policy A001 establishes a rotating basis basis for the municipality to review existing policies. Part of the essential question is, so where do you start? Administration had earlier to the last council proposed a list of priorities for policies of essentially defining where we would start. Council has reviewed that, and there was some action. Three policies have been rescinded. One has been forwarded to the 2023 budget discussions. And so we wanted to update the list with council's feedback. At committee last week, administration proposed the attached list here. And during that discussion, I did note that administration would see this as concurrent processes. It's a little bit like when you go to the restaurant and you order your appetizer and your meal and you say, just bring them when they're ready. That's exactly what we're asking council to do here is we'll start with these items, but it doesn't mean that we will wait to start citizen engagement until the electronic meetings are done. We would start all of those as we have staff available. And as you can see, a number of them are actually in different departments. And so we may have legislative protective services working on one policy while finance and administration is working on another. And so council can have some confidence that we won't wait to get to a policy necessarily until once the other are done. But we did have to figure out of all of the policies that exist, which bunch should be the first ones that we would tackle. And so the list is here, the interim electronic meetings and participation policy and related procedure, citizen engagement, debt and reserve limits, joint use of municipal facilities, the service standards policy, encroachments, budgets, project approvals, and finally staff recruitment. And then again, the intent of policy A001 is that all policies will be reviewed over the course of a 4-year council term. Worship, that's the list there. The recommendation from committee was that council approve the policy review priority list as presented. And of course, if council wished, they could make amendments to that list that they felt were appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Are there questions from councillors to administration? Councillor Melvin?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Given. And we've got the policy review, sorry, the list of policies to be reviewed. There is no timeline attached to this. I wonder, I know it's difficult going into the summer, busy time, but what type of anticipated timeline would we look at to start seeing these coming before council for review?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Melnick, through Mayor Ireland. It is subject to administrative capacity. Council will remember that we had hoped to secure a municipal intern that would provide some additional capacity to tackle these kind of things. We weren't successful in that application this year, but I'd note that the application window's opened again for the upcoming year, so we'll resubmit. So I'm a bit hesitant to establish timelines for these. There are some pretty significant differences between them. Encroachments, although it does impact the public, is a fairly technical matter, where citizen engagement obviously is a much larger issue that, sort of treads the technical, political, sort of citizen facing. So some of them could take substantially longer than others. And so I am at this time hesitant to sort of establish a timeline. I think administration would also want to wait until council confirmed the priority list, and then we would take back within the departments and start to put our heads together about when we think we would be able to come back. And that's something that we could report back to council by email after administration and SLT have had a chance to consider the priority list that council approves.
Thank you for that. Other questions of councillors? Mr. Given, not to belabor it, and I appreciate your analogy to a restaurant and ordering food, but I take it then that what council is being asked to do is approve a bundle as first priority, but not priorities within that bundle. Because my concern here is that there is limited capacity in administration, and there is a detailed list here, and it's not alphabetical. So it's designed somehow, which suggests a priority among these. And I appreciate from an administrative perspective, budget processes have already begun. They haven't begun yet for council, but to the extent that some of these impact budget, I would certainly be inclined to encourage those to come first if there is a question about capacity. And so debt and reserve limits, certainly reserve limits is a budgetary issue that's important for council and of growing importance. Be nice to have that nailed down before we have to get into budget discussions. Similarly, service standards, probably a different department, but service standards have or could have a direct impact on budget. So that's important. And the budget policy and administrative procedures themselves. So although I hear you saying that within this bundle, there are not intended to be priorities, I think just administratively, you can only wrap your hands around so many things at the same time. And so my inclination would be to lean toward those with budget implications, because that really will impact how we move forward in fairly short order, it seems to me. I just make that as an observation, not necessarily to change it, but recognizing that whatever it is, 9 items can't all be the first priority.
Your worship, that's appreciated, and appreciate the focus on budget. Administration, again, subject to council agreeing with this bundle of items, because council could also have independently looked at the policy list and said, well, actually, there's something that's not on this list that I think should be. But once council does approve this bundle, I think administration at the SLT level would take it away and say, okay, where can we start and who can do what? And certainly when we undertake that, we can have that lens of which one of these actually impacts financial decisions that we're going to have to bring forward to council. And that's absolutely a lens that we can apply when we internally assess how we're going to dedicate the admin resources to tackle the list.
Thank you for that. Other questions from council to administration? In the absence of other questions, I would entertain a motion from a councillor. Councillor Keller-Harampy.
The council approved the policy review priority list as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Harampy. Is there any debate on that motion? Seeing nothing, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Which takes us to agenda item 7.4. Appointments to the Commercial Use of Public Space Task Force. The recommendation from committee is that council appoint members as recommended by the mayor to represent the municipality on the Commercial Use of Public Space Task Force. And having discussed this at the last committee of the whole and having circulated a request for expression of interest, I believe that I am prepared to recommend that Councillor Demota and Councillor Wilson be appointed as council representatives to the Commercial Use of Public Space Task Force. So that would be my recommendation, and it's open to discussion, but if the motion carries as it is written, then that will be the recommendation on the appointments. Go ahead.
I'm happy with that appointment, and I would be happy with making the motion as well. Yeah, so I would make a motion that council appoint members of council as recommended by the mayor to represent the municipality on the commercial use of public space task force.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Wilson. Is there any debate? Go ahead, Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Mayor Island. I just have a question. Would there be an alternate appointed as well, or we just need two?
I don't think the terms of reference reference an alternate, so it's a good point, but the terms of reference don't provide for it. Councillor Melnick, are you adjusting or was your hand up? My hand is up now to see my hand was never up.
Yeah, I was just adjusting.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion. Is there any further debate? Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So the members appointed will be as recommended. Being Councillor Demota and Councillor Wilson. Which takes us to agenda item 7.5, which is appointments to the Emergency Advisory Committee. And again, similar situation, the committee has recommended that council appoint members as recommended by the mayor to the Emergency Advisory Committee. Because it's a new committee, we missed an opportunity at the organizational meeting. That opportunity will come again in a few months, so this might be a short appointment. But for now, and in compliance with the terms of reference, I think require the mayor to be a member of the Emergency Advisory Committee and two councillors. And again, having discussed this amongst council, my recommendations will be Councillor Waxer and Councillor Melnick appointed to the Emergency Advisory Committee. If there are no issues with the recommendation, then I would look for a motion that council appoint as recommended. Councillor Keller-Hampton.
The council appoint members of council as recommended by the mayor to the emergency advisory committee.
Is there any debate on that motion? Not, I will call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. So council shall appoint members as recommended by the mayor, and the recommendation is the mayor, Councillor Waxer, and Councillor Melnick. And seeing those three names together reminds me that I was remiss at the opening of the meeting to thank Councillor Waxer for her service as deputy mayor for the last 2 months, and to welcome Councillor Melnick as deputy mayor for July and August. So thank you, Kathleen. It turned out that you were called upon substantially more than I would have expected, but you rose to the occasion. So thank you very much. And Councillor Melnick, or Deputy Mayor Melnick, who knows what may come in the next 2 months, but prepare yourself. That takes us to agenda item 7.6, Council's 2022-2026 strategic plan. And this one, Mr. Gibbon, I will look to you.
Well, yes, Your Worship, this is a bit of a rarity on our regular council meeting agendas. This is an item that hasn't previously gone through a committee of the whole meeting, and so it is coming with a recommendation that is from administration that council adopt the 2022 to 2026 strategic priorities as presented. As council knows, in the early part of the year, council and senior administration went to an offsite event with a facilitator to do a bit of a strategic analysis and identify council's strategic directions and the themes that you wish to have included into your strategic priorities for this term. Since that time, council has been in a number of subsequent working sessions to further refine the text of those directions. The plan that's presented here and attached to the report sets forward a strategic and holistic view of community health and looking out for the community's interests. The plan identifies 30 strategic priorities that are grouped into 6 interrelated theme areas, those being community health, housing, relationships, environment, organizational excellence, and advocacy. The plan, as council knows, when formally adopted, will provide foundational guidance to municipal staff, both in how we respond and provide advice to you, and in terms of the upcoming budget and the priorities that you see reflected in the budget. Subject to council's, following council's approval of the strategic priorities, administration will do a final round of graphic design touch-ups and some minor text amendments to areas outside of the strategic priorities before finally posting the documents and making a limited number of hard copies available to the public who wish to have them. The strategic priorities importance can't be understated. Councils have invested a significant amount of time into developing these, and with good reason, because they really do set the direction for the entire corporation of the municipality of Jasper, and ultimately the projects and decisions that will be undertaken over the course of this term. So, Your Worship, the current draft of the strategic priorities document is attached. Again, administration is suggesting that once council makes this motion to adopt the strategic priorities as presented, that the text of the priorities themselves is fixed. The administration will do those final touch-ups and then post it to the website for access for the public.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and thank you, administration, for this. I'm very excited, as I'm sure we all are, that it's in front of us. I have a couple of comments. I'm not sure if I should say them all at once or go one at a time, but my first comment is just in the first page about Jasper, in the second paragraph, I'm concerned that we have a bit of missing history regarding our Mountain Métis and our Assiniboine Winnebago Nation. It says that before Jasper was a little more than a trading post in the wilderness. I know there's more to it, and I think that it's important that I recognize that. That is my first just comment. My second comment is community health. I'm really happy with bullet 2 and 3, just community engagement, and our residents are creating time together. The pictures, maybe one could be representative of community engagement, maybe instead of 2 physical health, because community health to me is not just physical health. There's a lot more to it, and that just I know it's not set, but one thing I noticed looking through it. I'll be quick. I only have a couple more. In relationships, and I think the last few weeks I've had time to partake in Indigenous People, National Indigenous Peoples Day, and being on the candidate committee, and really coming to my own with how I think about Canada, and especially in Jasper and our relationships. And I think that I would like to see in the third bullet, which is engage other municipalities, orders of government, and advocacy associations. I'm wondering if we could put in there engage other municipalities, orders of government, Indigenous partners, and advocacy organizations. I don't think that Indigenous partners falls into any of those 3 categories. I think it's important to recognize and have that in there, because we are, it's been a year and we're on the path towards reconciliation, and I think the relationship with our Indigenous partners is quite important. That's all I have for now, but other than that, I'm super excited to have this in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Mr. Killen.
Your Worship, just in terms of Councillor Hall's comments, the items that were outside of the council's strategic priorities, so that the comment about Jasper and more fulsome recognition of the true history of the place, understood, and the administration can certainly make that happen, along with the graphic design elements. Fair enough, and good feedback about community health being also for social health and vulnerable persons. That is the focus of the actual priorities in that area. Administration can absolutely do those 2 things without the need for a motion, I don't believe. I'd suggest that adding a specific recognition of a type of partner is a change to council strategic priorities, which you all work through. And I suggest that's the type of thing that probably does need a motion at the council table. Administration will do the little touch-ups outside of council's words. We're not going to touch up council's words. And it's up to council, I think, to make that, to formalize that.
Thank you for that. I will come back, Councillor Hall, to that. First, I will turn to other councillors for questions or comments about the material before us. Councillor Maxer.
Thank you. Again, I would say that I was happy with how it looked. But I wondered whether the light colored font might be difficult to read for some individuals, particularly older individuals or anyone with visual challenges. And again, like Councillor Hall, I noted the lack of reference to the Indigenous history. And I wondered whether that preamble could also maybe have a little bit more to do with the actual makeup of Jasper and reference the multicultural diversity or the diversity of the population currently living here. I think that I felt was kind of missing. It's a lot of history, but not so much about what is Jasper and that. Under community health, I wondered about continuing along the path of reconciliation and add that instead to relationships, because I think that as I was looking at it, the second and third time, it seemed to me that that's where it maybe lived more appropriately. And when we worked on the inclusion framework, we talked about including an inclusion lens to our decision-making process. And I noticed we had talked about an environmental lens further down. I wondered if it's possible to add that in. These are just the thoughts as I went through. I also wondered about adding the word, instead of just engage with other municipalities, and orders of government. I wondered if we could add the word collaborate, because I think in some ways that matches with our new relationship with external group policy. And then the final bullet on environment, I thought that maybe examine the environmental impact of our services and strive to improve would be a clearer message. That was all I had, which is quite it. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Other comments? I had two very minor comments. I would invite staff that you're looking at adjusting the About Jasper piece anyway, and I do agree that a reference to the human history of the area before European history is certainly appropriate, and perhaps something about the current makeup and dynamics of the community. But while you're at it, if there's going to be a reference to the name just check the spelling of Jasper Hawes. It might be correct, but I've seen it otherwise as well. So perhaps the museum could be a source of confirmation for the right spelling. The only other matter is very, very small on page 6, which is the spinning wheel of priorities. In particular, the reference to the values established by employees. That there should be a comma there between communication and teamwork. As I say, pretty minor. With respect to other matters, though, I hear from councillors about proposed changes to the content of, or the wording, the text of the priorities. And it seems to me that that requires a bit of discussion in perhaps another session. I would be inclined to perhaps direct this back to either a session at the next committee of the whole or a separate session. But it is critical that we all understand the words and agree with every particular word. And to do that now in this circumstance with admittedly fresh eyes and new ideas, I think that it is not fair to council, given the importance of this document, to try and wordsmith it in this setting. So I would suggest either we have another working session. I can't remember the name escapes me right now, but other than committee of the whole, we've done this in a structured setting, but not in a committee session. And I think we should go back to that one more time, perhaps schedule that for Tuesday of next week to follow perhaps after our committee of the whole. Is there anything else that ought to be said at this point about the draft? I would say I really do appreciate the work of administration to get it in this cleaned up format, and although there might be some fine tuning left to be done, this is excellent. The photographs can change a little bit and colors of fonts if necessary, but the wording is a critical matter, and it is decidedly a council matter. So if there, in the absence of objection, I would just say Mr. Given arrange for the council to have an opportunity to review this once again in a working session next Tuesday, potentially, when we are going to be together in the event.
Your worship, in fact, that's the alternative that's put into the RFD, that council refer the 2022 to 2026 strategic priorities to the future, and maybe next week you could identify that through the whole meeting for further refinement. And we could certainly do that. Given the nature of this, and that council has some dialogue and discussion back and forth about wordsmithing, it's appropriate that's a working session and camera session, because it is the development of the document that will become public. And so if council wishes to do that, you could do that by motion here today. Sort of this has arrived. What is council formally directing administration to do? And that alternative was considered in the report.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Is there a councillor prepared to make the motion? Thank you, Councillor Hall. And that is that council refer the 2022-2026 strategic priorities to the future committee of the whole meeting for further refinement, with the expectation that that will be the next committee of the whole meeting. Is there any debate on that motion? All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. And so I said, Councillor Hall, we would return, but we'll return in a week. Agenda item 8, correspondence. There is no correspondence attached for this agenda. Is there any other new business? Agenda item 10, the motion action list is there for information for council and for the public, just to let you know where things stand. Which takes us to agenda item 11, council reports.
Question about the motion actions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Evans. I do have a quick question about the motion action list. In particular, the JLFS, the Local Food Society. It's on the docket for October. My concern is that if the administration finds they need some sort of money from us, it's a bit too close to budget time to make that decision. I'm just wondering, I'm probably assuming it's because there's lots of other things on the go, but I wonder if that could be maybe moved up or.
Sure, Your Worship, for Councillor Hall. So the motion that committee made was for administration to explore a pretty wide variety of opportunities to support food security efforts. Like, it is probably the broadest motion possible. If there is something specific that's happening in the community that council wanted to act on differently, then I think any council member could add that to an agenda item and could move independently. I think there's probably the broad issue of food security and how we can support that in all of its forms. And then there may be more acute sort of time-bound issues. And so if there's something that council is aware of, maybe they want to raise that as an agenda item on maybe the whole meeting, or if the community would want to come forward with something that was specific, then certainly we could say so. But I think in terms of administration being able to follow up on this pretty broad motion that takes a really wide view of food security, yeah, administration would need that time to do that. But if there is something additional that is more acute, more specific that council wants to follow up on, then we'd be happy to take that direction.
Before we leave the second time, anything else on the motion actions? All right, if not, I will turn to agenda item 11, councillor reports. Are there councillor reports? No. Councillor Keller-Hampy.
I believe on Friday, I will be going to Edmonton to attend the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway AGM, as Councillor Amanda will not be able to attend there, so I hope to that one.
Thank you. Well, I missed the last regular meeting, so I have lots to report, but I will be brief. Going back to June 18th, I was involved in the lemonade judging with Councillor Keller-Hampy and Councillor Demota, and we judged 5 or 6 stands, kids out on the street, or on the sidewalks, I should say, selling their lemonade, and it was an excellent day for judging and for the community and the kids involved. Also on June 18th, I was honored to be asked to speak at the Rotary dinner, raising funds for Ukrainian newcomers to our community. That was a great event. On the 20th of June, I attended the Every Child Matters flag raising, and as it turned out, we were honored to participate in a pipe ceremony, which was somewhat unexpected and very much an honor and a privilege for us to have that. Elder John Wesley of the Stone Dakota gave that pipe ceremony, or conducted that pipe ceremony, and then together we raised the Every Child Matters flag And that was in anticipation of and in advance of the activities on the 21st of June, which is National Indigenous Peoples Day, and that was celebrated here. And then the council was able to come over after the close of our council business that day and at least catch part of that, which ended with an intertribal dance and a round dance. But it really was a great opportunity to welcome Indigenous peoples back into their traditional territory. And I will say the feedback that I have received, particularly from Elder John Wesley, has really been positive. They had an excellent day and felt that, in fact, they had actually been welcomed back into what had been their traditional territory, and from which they had at least felt that they had been excluded. On the following day, I relied on Deputy Mayor Waxer to bring greetings to something called Miss Milestones, the 91st birthday of, I think, our oldest living female resident, who also was born in Jasper, Mrs. Hobo, celebrated her birthday, and together they marked the milestones with respect to all the businesses that are housed under that roof, including, I think, 61 years for the laundromat and 18 years for the Snow Dome Cafe and 1 year for Andromeda Cafe. But, Kathleen did a wonderful job representing us on that occasion. On one of those days, the day before, was the Francophone graduation, and again, Deputy Mayor Waxer agreed to speak to our one Francophone grad on that day. On the 29th, I spoke to the Jasper Junior Senior High School graduating class. There might have been a counselor or two present there. One of them had a graduate, so that was great to see. And of course, and then they all had to rush off to Edmonton to get a passport. Of course, July 1st, you were all engaged in that. A good day. Crowd's not quite what we might have expected, but certainly substantial and really a good day for Jasper. And then yesterday and again, most of you here today were involved in the team's meeting with Minister Shandro, the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General. So we were able to discuss Jasper's unique situation in the context of course, his issue with provincial police force. But I really thank the efforts of everybody to ensure that the minister left with a much stronger appreciation of the unique circumstances under which we operate in this community. So that was, I think, about 8 different events in 13 days, just giving an indication that there's lots going on outside of our own council meetings. That is my report. Are there additional reports? All right, if not, we can move to agenda item 12, upcoming events. And in our wisdom at the organizational meeting, apparently we built in a break. I'm glad somebody brought that to my attention. I would have forgotten. So we have committee of the whole next week, and then a bit of a break. And back again, then I would think that would mean August 9th. For our next meeting after that. Are there any other upcoming events to bring to the attention of council? If not, I would invite a motion to adjourn at 2:49. Councillor Keller-Hampy. I'm sorry, Councillor Melnick, I saw that hand too late. Unless you're already voting in favor, and I haven't yet called the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you all. And thank you to members of the public who tuned in, and 9:30 next Tuesday morning, we will be back at it, sitting as Committee of the Whole, chaired by Deputy Mayor Melnick. Look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.